Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Mayer. I'm a member of the NCWA Board of Directors, and I'm chairman of NCWA's Groundwater Management Task Force. The theme of this year's conference is Ridgetop to Rivermouth, and this is one of three conversations exploring dimensions of that geography. One of these discussions focuses on forest health and the headwaters. Another one of these conversations examines the relationship between runoff and the valley landscape, the reactivation of our floodplains. And this conversation follows that water not only toward the river mouth, but as it soaks into our fertile soils. Groundwater has long been an essential resource in the Sacramento Valley, and in many ways, we've been good managers and stewards of that resource. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act challenges us local water and land managers to take the next step in planning and organizing and management to secure that resource for future generations and to protect the environmental and social values as well as the economic ones. For most of the groundwater sustainability agencies in the Sacramento Valley, 2021 is a big year. We're finishing our groundwater sustainability plans for submission to the Department of Water Resources by January of 2022. Lots of hard work is going into those plans, analysis and modeling, engagement and coordination. So first, a big thank you to all of you who are managing and contributing or participating in the development of those plans. Even with a mostly healthy groundwater resource, developing these plans has been a heavy lift. For today's conversation, we want to take a step back and look to the horizon beyond January 2022. The agencies will have 20 years to demonstrate that the plans developing now will result in sustainable management of groundwater resources. So the planning phase is really just preparation for the real implementation phase. That will be when we can deploy what we know and explore what we don't, where we can work with natural and engineered infrastructure to pursue sustainability and resiliency, where we can design and implement strategies that protect and restore ecosystem functions while fortifying the supplies for agriculture and our communities. We've asked three of our colleagues, three exceptional groundwater stewards, to share how they are thinking about the next 20 years. Jim Pfeiffer is the Executive Director of the Regional Water Authority and the Sacramento Groundwater Authority. Jim works on behalf of nearly 24 water agencies in the American and Sacramento River watersheds. He previously worked for the City and County of Sacramento. He's an engineer by training and a strategic thinker and diplomat and leader by profession and reputation. Maurice Hall is Associate Vice President for Water Ecosystems at the Environmental Defense Fund. Maurice also has worked for the Nature Conservancy and as a consultant. He has a PhD in hydrology and water resource science, and he's a licensed engineer. We appreciate Maurice in the Sacramento Valley for his efforts to work collaboratively with landowners, growers, and water agencies to find ways to restore our rivers while meeting human needs. And Kristen Sickey is the Assistant General Manager of the Yolo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. And she is the Executive Officer of the Yolo Sub-Basin Groundwater Agency. Kristen also has worked within the Integrated Regional Water Management Division of the Department of Water Resources. Kristen also is an engineer with a bachelor's and master's degrees from UC Davis. And she has been at the forefront of active conjunctive use of surface and groundwater here in my home watershed of Cache Creek. Jim, we're going to turn to you first. Tell us your thoughts about the next 20 years.
Thank you, Jim. I'm really pleased to be here today. I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint presentation and speak off of it. We're thankful for our long partnership with NCWA in helping move the Sacramento Valley forward in water supply, sustainability for the environment, and the economy. The theme for the conference is Ridgetop to Rivermouth Water Management. That's the approach that the American River folks are employing. In fact, we have a new term that relates to this, supershed. I'll get back to that term in just a little bit. We're interested in bringing resources and funding to build projects in the service of multi-benefit objectives. Also, we're really interested in developing a suite of projects to serve those purposes. Examples are flood mar projects to improve flood control and to move water into the groundwater basin. Safecut has a project that does that. They're working with Placer County Water Agency to see if they can install some new floodgates at a reservoir upstream in the watershed. And with that, it would provide for some flood space. That water would be routed downstream, hopefully into the groundwater basin. Similarly, Regional Sand has a project that uses recycled water and redirects that water for agricultural use, which in turn provides some environmental benefits and is helpful for Sigma. It appears to benefit the groundwater dependent ecosystems. Our initiative is called Water Future, and you see a number of these projects here. It is a suite of projects, again, which tie together multi-purpose objectives. We need it to help adapt to near-term challenges like Sigma, voluntary agreements, and the like. It will be important for the challenges of flood, fire, and drought, which accompany climate change. We're here to make the connection to groundwater, and we are busy preparing groundwater sustainability plans, just like the other GSAs in the Valley are doing. I wanted to focus on how we increase sustainability by focusing on a few projects with a strong nexus to groundwater. And that is one of them, the Sacramento Regional Groundwater Bank. It's a conjunctive use project that will allow us to sustainably store water when it's available and use it when it is needed. Just like a real bank, you need to make a deposit before you make a withdrawal, and that describes the idea really well. We will be setting rules around deposits and withdrawals to ensure that it is managed sustainably. Within the urban area, we have a large amount of infrastructure that has already been built, and if we can utilize that in a way that enhances conjunctive use, we will be able to add roughly 60,000 acre feet of water supply to the system. And that's just with existing investments. With planned investments that many of our members are going to undertake in the next several years, that will add another 30,000 acre feet. That's over the course of the next 10 years, all within the urban area. But we have the potential to do more. If we add flood mar, recycled water, and the potential agricultural areas north and south of the Sacramento urban area, which extend from the Bear River to the Cosumnes River, we could potentially add 250,000 acre feet. We're seeking federal acknowledgement of our groundwater bank, something that was codified in the Central Valley Project Improvement Act. Our staff includes a geologist who early in his career worked on the Kern Water Bank, and he brought the idea to the RWA and adapted it to the urban area. One beneficial thing of this bank is it's north of the Delta, so it adds a great deal of flexibility. RiverArc is another important project to our portfolio. It is a project that reuses an existing modern screen diversion from the Sacramento River and adapts it to urban use. It'll take the pressure off the American River, which often has good water supply conditions, but occasionally has a dud in some water years. It allows the region to diversify its portfolio and it's a good project for advancing conjunctive use. At the RWA, we do a lot with water conservation and water use efficiency. And that's part of our supply mix too, and reliability mix. Knitting these projects together, including the groundwater basins with surface water, is key to our success. And like I said earlier, we have a new term, supershed. Supershed means a region consisting of multiple watersheds that is actively managed to improve water resource resilience in support of a healthy community, economy, and environment. But really, that is what the Sacramento Valley has been doing for a long time. We just coined a new name for it. And we see projects like that all throughout the Valley. on the Puta, on the Feather, and on the main stem, even the Yuba. I will close by saying that the American River is embarking on a renewed commitment to the Water Forum. Many of you have heard about the Water Forum Agreement, and we are updating that. Our partners in the local environmental community are interested in many of the same things we are as water purveyors. We are looking forward to the next chapter of the Water Forum, what we call Water Forum 2.0. There are a number of challenges that we have that weren't around 20 years ago, like the Water Quality Control Plan, SGMA, or climate change. We look forward to charting a path together. Our friends in the NGO community are keenly interested in groundwater dependent ecosystems, and appropriately so, amongst other things. So those are my remarks. I would also like to close with one last slide, and that is on climate change. We're going to have to adapt to, again, the floods, fires, and droughts that accompany climate change and changes in timing of precipitation and flows through our watershed and into the Delta. With some of these projects that I had listed earlier, we will be able to achieve that. And we're looking forward to increased resilience, including our ability to comply with SGMA, knit these projects together, and manage them for multiple purposes. Thank you.
That's terrific, Jim. And the American River is clearly an essential and in some ways pretty distinct watershed. And the projects you've got connecting parts of that watershed as well as the entities that are involved is really a sign of what's possible here in the next generation. Maurice, Jim mentioned the interest, particularly around some of those in the NGO community, about the relationship between surface and groundwater. That's not the only thing you've been working on, but one of the things that we've all turned to you for in terms of guidance is really how do we make these right connections between what's above ground, what's below ground, and how can we learn from the kinds of research that you and your colleagues are doing?
Thank you very much, Jim. I also have a few slides that I'll use along with my presentation. And, repeating what has been said before, I know the GSAs and the water users in the Sacramento Valley are laser focused in the near term on implementation of SGMA. There is a lot of work to do. I'm really excited about working with the folks in the Sacramento Valley to figure out and shape up a way to address the surface water depletion aspects of SGMA, which is one of the more challenging parts of SGMA. Today, I want to look forward, kind of reflecting on the types of ideas that Jim just described, and Kristen is going to describe some similar work that they're doing up on the Yuba. But to take a look forward at how we can take more full advantage of the opportunity of SGMA to get more functionality out of our groundwater and really build true water supply resilience. I'll posit to begin that I think groundwater basins have generally been underutilized. There are these great facilities there that we put wells in and pumped, but our groundwater management of the past, as many of you know, has tended to be passive and reactionary. Under-monitored, underfunded. Certainly, there are clear examples to the contrary. I can't help but note the great work that the folks down in Yolo County have been doing with monitoring their groundwater, proactively recharging it. Jim mentioned some work they're doing in Sacramento County as well. So certainly noticeable exceptions, but in general, we've really sort of just waited till something happens and something's gone wrong in our groundwater management, in our groundwater conditions before we take action. But, and if you think of groundwater function as sort of a dial, we've been operating down in the low part of the function where we're at risk if we're not really paying attention and not being proactive. And we're also foregoing some of the benefits that groundwater basins can provide to us. Now we're at SGMA, and SGMA implementation offers a new era. And I would argue that we've clicked that knob up a notch, and we're doing a better job we're complying with SGMA. We're going to be doing a better job of managing our groundwater, but even SGMA is primarily defensive in nature. Don't create undesirable results. Sort of don't make things worse. But with SGMA in place, now you have to manage. And with that management and the institutional structure that you're building around it, we now have an opportunity to do more with our groundwater basins. So let's think a little bit about what we can do with that management in place and those structures in place, and with a better understanding of how our groundwater basins act and behave. And I think it's helpful to get to the point we need to be, if we start thinking more about our groundwater basins as natural infrastructure. Now, this is not a big leap for you folks in the Sacramento Valley. You've been thinking about this with your floodplains. You've been thinking about it in the upper watersheds, and the dialogue and over today highlights that. And so when you think about the groundwater basins, we've tended to, be fairly passive. We put wells in and pump. But let's think for a moment about all of the things that groundwater basin is doing for us. There's a huge suite of water supply services that it's providing. It's collecting water from a wide range of sources, including rainfall, but also irrigation, leakage, and other sources. So it's collecting that water. The upper layers of it are treatment facilities, a great biotreatment facility that treats water so that most of the groundwater in the Sacramento Valley is of good quality. It also stores, conveys that water over long distances. And in addition to just the straight water supply benefits, it's supporting habitat, groundwater dependent ecosystems, and supporting our stream flow. It's this amazing set of groundwater infrastructure. And so we need to start thinking about this infrastructure as a really expensive, valuable resource. And implementing SGMA is a good start. But if you start understanding that as we implement SGMA, we will understand our groundwater basins better, and we'll have the institutions in place to start managing them. And so let's think about what it takes and what it looks like if you take that management to the next level. If you click that groundwater management dial up to where we're thinking about how to build real resilience. So I'm just going to quickly highlight a few images of what that resilience and that next level might look like. Managed recharge, really important. And we're already doing a lot of work in that, the whole flood marsh system built around that. And going the next level beyond managed recharge, we need to start thinking about how to manage those recharge ponds, perhaps to provide habitat, match the habitat and timing needs for migratory birds. And I point to the great work that's being done by the rice growers and TNC and Audubon and others in the Sacramento Valley. They're really setting the stage. We need to follow through, perfect that, and build it into our automatic way of doing things. Jim also mentioned Regional Sands Harvest Water Project. Great example of integrating the different parts of our water system, taking advantage of the great facilities that are underneath the ground, and proactively providing better support for habitat and also providing drought water supplies. Now, I think the general concept of groundwater storage and banking has a lot of different aspects. And one of the things that I would like for us to think more about is the idea of using the coordinated management of our surface water and groundwater storage. Obviously, some great work being done, not some of that Kristen will describe, but think about these surface water reservoirs as forebays for the groundwater, pre-releasing water in advance to store water in the groundwater for future. The Sacramento Regional Groundwater Storage Facility is an example of this kind of work, and there's much more that we can do. Another example of taking it to the next level, something that I think has a lot of strength, is let's think about banking some environmental water in these groundwater basins. Just imagine if we had some water allocated to the environment, banked in the groundwater basins up and down the Central Valley, and what we could do with that water in times of urgent need for habitat. providing supplemental flows, adding flexibility through exchanges, and emergency cool water, perhaps. So a huge range of things that we can do if we start thinking proactively, using our inventiveness to manage groundwater proactively and taking it to the next level. What will it take? First step, Sigma implementation. Getting that right, getting that robust accounting systems in place, new management mechanisms in place. It's also going to take funding. You have expensive facilities. We didn't have to build these groundwater basins, but we do need to maintain them and monitor them. It's going to take money, and we're going to have to recognize that moving forward. I think there are new ways that we can cooperate. Unprecedented cooperation going forward is going to be needed, and it's going to be possible now with the GSAs in place. And with that, we can build shared innovation. And of course, all of this is built on trust. So I'll leave you with a thought of next time you're looking across the Sacramento Valley, don't only think about the infrastructure that's above the ground. That's really important, that what we built, we have to take care of it, but also think about this amazing water collection, treatment, storage, and conveyance system that underlies the Central Valley. Thank the Creator for building it, and thank your GSA in advance for taking care of it. And encourage them and urge them, support them to take it to the next level and make the most out of this incredible natural facility.
Wow, that's terrific, Maurice. Really appreciate that. It's really exceptionally helpful for you to enumerate and describe all of those infrastructure-like functions that are occurring below our feet that's so easy to take for granted. And your recognition that in developing these plans and these agencies, we've now created the institutional relationships to move beyond pilot projects and individual relationships and really do something over the course of a generation or two. So that's really a huge contribution to the conversation. Thank you. Kristen, in Yolo County, we've been doing a little bit of this, as Maurice has said. So is past prologue, or what's the future look for us?
So I really appreciate Maurice teeing this up for me. And I sort of see a future slogan on our website asking if people have thanked their GSA recently. I really like that perspective. So as Jim had originally said, I'm Kristen Sickey, Assistant General Manager at the Yolo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. We are located about 30 miles west of Sacramento, and we cover approximately 200,000 acres and provide irrigation water to farmers in western Yolo County. So our district was formed in 1951 to plan, develop, and manage the conjunctive use of our surface and groundwater resources to provide safe and reliable water supply at a reasonable cost, to also sustain socioeconomic and environmental well-being of the county. We have a pretty serious mission, and we manage and operate our irrigation releases from Clear Lake and Indian Valley reservoirs in Lake County, as you can see on the image on the screen. And then we divert flows on Cache Creek at the Cape Hay Diversion Dam in Yolo County. At the diversion dam, we then manage an 160-mile unlined or earthen canal system that provides benefit to the natural environment and the working rural landscape that we very much value in our region. Our rain-fed reservoirs provide ample supplies for farmers for about 7 out of the 10-year record, and our groundwater reserves are very vital. Clearly, as Maurice was saying, the largest reservoir is underground, and it needs to be better utilized and appreciated. So as everyone knows, groundwater supplies are not unlimited, and aquifers need to be protected from overdraft, subsidence, and contamination. And since the 1950s, our district has been actively engaged in preserving the local groundwater resources and by monitoring groundwater levels, recharging aquifers, and measuring water quality. Over the previous 15 years, we have contributed or made a significant investment in modernizing the canal system. We've been automating gates and delivery points to enhance efficiencies and minimize losses throughout the system. We've developed a robust remote communication system, also known as SCADA, that allows us to have local control of our irrigation operations. So we actively monitor, gather, and process real-time data. And over the past 60 years, we've conducted biannual measurements on more than 100 wells, which has served as a very valuable continuous record of groundwater levels, and it shows the changes through multiple cycles of drought and high water years. Going back to Maurice's discussion of getting this accounting going or network established. And then over the past decade, we have invested in modernizing our groundwater monitoring network. So we've installed more than 20 real-time monitoring wells, which allows us to track the groundwater levels in real time. And it's provided a framework for us to evaluate trends in use and recovery. And so all of these investments, combined with our unlined canal policy and our district mission, placed us in a really excellent position to be able to take advantage of Governor Brown's 2015 executive order, which streamlined temporary permits for diverting excess flows to groundwater recharge. Utilizing the permit requires this kind of perfect storm or balance of very specific conditions. We have to have enough precipitation to result in excess storm flow conditions, and we need to have not too much precipitation to cause storm damage in the canal system or to result in flooding the landscape. Since 2016, we've been taking advantage of this temporary permitting process, and we have successfully diverted excess storm flows for 3 out of the 5 years, resulting in approximately 20,000 acre-feet of groundwater recharge. We're currently developing a framework for a long-term permit with the State Water Board to memorialize this water right and application of this conjunctive use project, because we do believe that in implementing the GSP, this is going to be a very critical project to continue in the future to ensure future sustainability. And quality of groundwater is just as important as quantity, as everyone knows. So in Yolo County, for the past few decades, farmers and resource managers have been working towards meeting state and local water quality objectives to ensure that the beneficial users are not impacted. The primary constituents of concern within our region are arsenic, boron, chromium, nitrate, and salinity. And in Yolo County specifically, the monitoring and reporting has been conducted by numerous public agencies and through programs such as CV Salts, Gamma, and the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, which I'm sure is similar to many other regions. And right now, what we're currently working on is identifying this nexus with SGMA and the water quality programs. As we draft our groundwater sustainability plan, it's very apparent that coordination is extremely important, and that the groundwater sustainability projects that we plan to implement cannot result in future degradation. So the foundation of our Yolo Subbasin groundwater sustainability plan is the robust groundwater level monitoring network that we've established, along with our history of responsible conjunctive management and proactive water quality monitoring. We believe we've been really good stewards of the resources to date, and in aggressively monitoring our resources, we feel like we can adaptively manage the system in the future. And then, of course, there's the uncertainties that we need to be prepared for of the change in landscape and climate. And so our future will really be dependent on implementing these successful multi-benefit projects that Maurice was talking about. We're currently working with DWR and TNC to talk about a bird return and flood MARD project within the region. And we are coordinating with Audubon, and we look forward to working with other partners in the future to get to that point of implementing successful multi-benefit projects. And we're also in the process of soliciting projects from our stakeholders, local stakeholders and local partners, to facilitate this effective prioritization process for selecting the most beneficial projects to help us meet our 2042 sustainability deadline. So we really look forward to moving into the GSP implementation process, I should say. I was hoping that in developing the GSP, that would be the hard work, but I know that come January, we're really just going to get started. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
Thanks very much, Kristen. Well, why don't we start with you for a little bit of follow-up here. You've got a lot of things in the queue there. If we were to fast forward 10 or 15 years, what kinds of things do you think we could see on the ground? And Yolo County because of the work that's being initiated now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I referenced, we are working with DWR and TNC, and we're hoping to have a few pilot projects in the next few years start for flooding farm fields that are it currently aligns with their schedules, so that we can start to monitor the bird return potential and the groundwater recharge potential from those projects. They're currently doing that in the Colusa subbasin. And so we've been talking with them to see how successful it's been up there and see if we can also do it. There's also very low-hanging fruit within our region where there are growers within our service area that are solely using groundwater. And so I think if we could step up our communication and outreach efforts to try to stress the importance of very strategically maximizing our conjunctive management of the basin, hopefully we can make some smaller investments in getting them connected to our system so that they can use surface water when it's available and preserve groundwater in years when there's no surface water. And then, as I mentioned, this long-term permit for continuing recharge through the canal system is really important to us and something that we hope won't take too long to get formalized.
Yeah, terrific. I know one small grower that would be happy to be connected to the system, so I could draw in some surface water and not be dependent on my groundwater in wet years.
Awesome.
So Maurice, one of your points in your final couple of slides that was really agenda setting was this is going to require even more cooperation. And I'm curious, what kinds of things, where are the biggest opportunities? What kind of coordination do we need here? Where is that opportunity? And you also mentioned that this is essential to be increasing trust, because I think that's also going to be an element of how fast and how far we can go. It's really a product of how much we can work together. And share us a little bit more about what you would like to see happen if you could script that out for us.
Well, I think in the Sacramento Valley, you have to look at the federal and state facilities. Huge part of our water storage capacity above ground, and lots of possibilities in how Shasta and Oroville and the other surrounding reservoirs might be used. But when you think of state and federal projects, you also think, probably not the most nimble. Lots of legacy of structure and sometimes good reason, and not necessarily able to adapt and try new things. And so I think the state has shown the appetite, at least for leadership and looking at things differently. Really need to see more of that. I think some of the opportunities are going to be dependent on good state cooperation, and looking forward, I think how the federal facilities are and the people there are going to be able to adapt and be look at things like the regional shared governance opportunities that we've talked about, so that we have expectations and confidence that things are going to be followed through. We as stakeholders in the realm, both water user, environmental groups, have confidence that our interests are being recognized and are going to be represented in the governance. That's a big part of what the future could hold. And I can't help but say Sac Valley interests have tended to be at the forefront of cooperation and building the trust. And so I do have a huge confidence of the possibilities that are there.
A couple of things stand out to me from your comments. One is, so oftentimes we're thinking about the cooperation between, say, the NGOs or the stakeholder community and the water providers. We're trying to avoid past conflicts and move towards some kind of informed agreement on solutions that are both good for the environment and good for the social and economic concerns. But what you're also emphasizing there is that those of us in or working with government have to lead through example. Our institutions have to be cooperating and collaborating, particularly if we want to be effective at bringing in the community stakeholders. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I heard that as as an admonition or a charge or a challenge for those of
Yeah.
us in and around government. So thank you for that. I think that's a reasonable expectation that government leads by example in resolving our own conflicts if we expect people in the community to follow and be part of. And Jim, that just sets up you perfectly here, because you mentioned in your comments that the Water Forum stakeholders are interested in 2.0. And if I remember my history right, the Water Forum came out of 20 years of really nasty fighting over the future of the American River and where water would be diverted and where it would go. And it was a historic kumbaya moment when the agreement was reached with East Bay Mud and others, and the Water Forum was created to steward that agreement forward. So what's the next generation of that look like? What does the Water Forum 2.0 need to do, and how's that connected to our efforts to manage the groundwater?
Thank you, Jim. You're right. The last Water Forum agreement, it was 7 years of negotiations, and then it was signed in the year 2000. And it resolved a lot of conflict in the region. It resolved the conflict that you talked about with East Bay Mud, which actually was a predecessor of the conflict, and the water agencies within the region. And it provided for two co-equal objectives, and that is to protect the lower American River, including the scenic values, the environment, and the recreational aspects of it, and also to provide for the economy in the Sacramento region. And a key element of that was reducing. Everybody knew that water demands would go up, but we would reduce them in times that it would be harmful to fisheries. And key in that is conjunctive use. So what does Water Forum 2.0 look like? I would say that people are focused on the future. They're focused on climate change. And the questions that are now coming up are, in the future, around the year 2085, it looks like 15 out of 100 years will result in such that there probably won't be enough water to go around. And how are we going to address that? And that 15 out of 100 years was based on a U.S. Bureau of Reclamation basin study that was performed for the region and estimated that. It's a long time from now, but in some ways, you really need to get going for water projects. Sometimes it takes 20 years to just start turning the earth on it. And then those projects might have a 60-year lifespan. So a lot of questions about how we do that. That's sort of a central framing of Water Forum 2.0. And we're just starting to get into those discussions about how we'll take care of those issues. So I suspect that it's going to result in more projects that will do conjunctive use. It will allow us to adapt to the changes in hydrology and more runoff earlier in the year. And we'll have to identify those activities that allow us to adapt to that. But also, the environmental NGOs that are part of the Water Forum Agreement have said, how can you do that in a way that's not going to harm the fishery? And that's going to take some real work, and it will take investment, like Maurice had talked about. And we will have to start flexing and utilizing this natural infrastructure, including the groundwater basin, to be able to adapt to those types of things. So I think that's a snapshot of what I see for Water Forum 2.0. We're just starting the process. It's probably going to take another 2 years to get through it, but that's kind of what I'm seeing at the very beginning of this.
Thanks. That's terrific. You know, one thing that comes to my mind here is we're going to have to innovate. California likes to think of itself as an innovative state. Oftentimes that innovation is in the private sector. Oftentimes, but not always, it involves technology. And that's not the innovation I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about where the current answers we have just don't bring us the kind of improvement or adaptation, as you said, fast enough or quick enough or at scale. So this may be hard to anticipate, but where are the spaces that we're going to need to innovate? Where are the procedures or the rules or our understandings or our technologies just not adequate for us to be able to build our capacity to manage, to get ourselves all the way over on Maurice's dial, right? We need to build some muscle in order to get over onto the side of Maurice's dial. And my sense is that whatever the true impact of climate change or the timing, it has not yet been accurately predicted in a study. We're going to learn about that in real time. And the demands for adaptation are going to be predicated on our preparation for that need. So that's a little bit vague concept, but as we look to the future, how do we think about where we need to put some energy, some thought process, some cooperation, some analysis in figuring out how to do something better? And I'll take a raised hand. Maurice, thank you.
I'll respond and hopefully start a helpful dialogue. But one of the points I was sort of hit askance in what I was describing is the sort of the expectations of the future of the groundwater sustainability agencies. We, a lot of work right in front of us, no doubt. But there is such an opportunity there with proactive management of these facilities that we do ourselves a disservice if we don't really think about putting the resources into these GSAs that are needed. We know how to manage groundwater very well. You go to McClellan Air Force Base and other places that we could mention. We know sometimes within days when a plume is going to show up at a well. We know how groundwater works, but it means that we have to monitor it. We have to invest in those systems. But with that knowledge, we can store a lot of water. We can plan to take a lot of water out safely of groundwater basins safely if we have that institutions in place, and that investing in that now so that we have that understanding and we can predict how we're going to need to adapt to these big swings that are going to occur. And frankly, as you described, our understanding of those is going to evolve continually. And so we have to be able to predict as best we can, predict the range of circumstances. And if we do, those groundwater basins can be exceptionally valuable in helping us manage for that water supply future under those climate change conditions.
So Maurice, I heard you say in terms of investment, I heard both kind of investment in the technology and the knowledge, right? The ability to have that detailed understanding, but it also is just going to require some financial investment, obviously as well. And that's a space I think that is where there's a lot of innovation happening as well. There's a lot of people have a stake in us better managing this system than just the state general fund, and I think and beyond even ratepayers. So I could see us wanting and needing to innovate both in terms of the applications of technology and what we do with that knowledge, as well as how we're going to raise and invest financial resources in order to build the adaptive systems we need. So that's really helpful. Other thoughts on innovation?
I'd like to build on something that Maurice said. I think that's really important how he flagged a couple issues. One is proactive management, and I agree with investment. But I'd like to talk a little bit about how that's done in an urban setting. So often you'll have an agency that is close to a river that built a surface water diversion to divert surface water for its customers. And then a little bit distant from the river, you might have a community that was built off groundwater because it was just cheaper to do. And those systems matured, and that presents a great opportunity for a collaborative relationship between those two agencies. You can have that groundwater agency that has a competitive advantage and often has maybe some surplus production capacity to produce extra groundwater to send to a surface water agency, and vice versa. So when there is a wet year or a flush season of surface water, we can send surface water to that groundwater agency. But I think that we need to sort of integrate that into the operations more. We haven't really cracked that sufficiently just yet. And sometimes there are some barriers to that collaboration. often it's how they view a transaction, and they might feel like it would be too costly to enter into that. But I think that there are opportunities and more collaboration and more to build on to be able to make sure that they can work together. And we're breaking down those barriers in the Sacramento region. But there's probably there is more that we can do. The other thing I want to say is I think we need to invest. It would really be great if we had some additional help from the state and federal government. And I know that they're very interested in solving some of these problems too. It can be pretty expensive to have two water delivery systems, a surface water or a groundwater, or integrate them. But I think that there's really some opportunities to make those investments, particularly when it comes to environmental water. And I think that that's something that needs a little bit more development. It seems like the tools are there for us, but we just need to assemble them to making sure that we can achieve some of those things that Maurice had talked about in terms of making environmental water available either for flows or building onto the cold water pools, say at Folsom Reservoir.
That's terrific. Lots of room to innovate on policies that just a few years ago were pretty novel, including even the concept of environmental water and environmental water budgets. So maybe we're just taking baby steps in that regard, and this is our opportunity to really do something much more significant. Kristen, I'm interested in your thoughts on the innovation, and particularly because Yolo County has kind of been on the forefront here, and the projects you described are ambitious and interesting, and do some of that integrated multiple benefits that Jim and Maurice have talked about. But what are we going to need for that to happen?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I know that Jim Pfeiffer had already touched on this, but it appears we will need to be very innovative with how we think about these regulatory processes that we're working within. And so one thing we've really been working on doing is becoming an advocate for our area, trying to educate CDFW, trying to educate the State Water Board, trying to educate the Regional Board, all the entities on the value of these projects. And we're trying to bring them out to have their boots on the ground to understand how it's really affecting our region and improving things for us. So building on Maurice's, trust is everything. That is something that I think using this data that we have, being transparent, showing that we're trustworthy, I think it'll help us to maybe start to figure out how to streamline or work more efficiently within the existing regulatory processes. And I think that the State Water Board may be starting to think creatively about how the meeting the undesirable results through SGMA can work within their permitting structure or framework for groundwater recharge being considered. And so I think that as long as we can continue to work really closely with these state and, as Maurice and Jim said, federal partners, I think that will benefit us in the long run so that we can all bring our smart minds to the table and think about a creative way to get the projects implemented faster, because that's going to be very important. Like you were saying, we may not really know the climate change impacts until they're actually happening. So anything to speed up the construction timelines would be wonderful.
That's great. So we're almost out of time. Maybe we can kind of take our sights off that 20-year horizon and bring ourselves back to a minute for not just the year ahead of us in terms of finalizing our SGMA plans, but this is a dismally dry year. And I'm always struck by the irony of us trying to think long-term and plan for the future, but preoccupied with the present. And there are times where, even preoccupied with the challenge of the moment, we are able to develop solutions or take actions or develop relationships or develop trust, all of these intangible things that you've all been mentioning in those challenging times that then allow us to accelerate our pace afterwards. And I'm curious, so looking at 2021, is there anything you can think of we could do this year, both as we finalize our plans, and as we manage a second very dry year, that would accelerate us either on our knowledge or our relationships?
So I'll start out again, and I think it's a really exciting and a really scary time to be in water. I think looking forward to this year, one of the things I'm really excited about is a project called OpenET that we have initiated with NASA, the Desert Research Institute, and Google, which is going to put good, reliable, trusted data at low cost on evapotranspiration use from irrigated agriculture, on accessible to everyone, which is an opportunity to begin learning more clearly just how our water is being deployed and allowing us to improve how we respond to that. We have a new federal administration. Our hopes are that they're going to come leaning in, working to work in a problem-solving mode in California and across the West. Good signals so far. Matching that up with the Newsom administration in California, who's already shown that this is a priority for them. I think there's some real opportunities in the near term to build some trust and start implementing some of that trusting shared governance that has been eluding us so far.
That's terrific, Maurice. Let's hope you're right on both counts.
I'd like to add something. I think you're right. I think it's in the context of relationship building, and we are in a new phase with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, the operator of Folsom Reservoir. One of the things that we've been trying to do is establish what's called a flow management standard with Reclamation, and they have adopted it, and they're trying to figure out how to make it work. Part of that is some discussions with us about how you make this initiative work. The flow management standard, you can think of it as 3 parts. One is minimum in-stream flows for the protection of fish. 2 is temperature management, so you plan out the temperatures for the year. And then 3 is a certain amount of water that's left in the reservoir at the end of the year. And that can be a very challenging thing. The reason why you want that is because if you have a subsequent dry year, you'll have enough in order to get you through the year without it draining. So like all new relationships and renewed relationships, sometimes there's a little bit of friction, but it's a marriage. And we're having that with Reclamation. I don't mean the friction part, but just trying to understand each other's concerns and coordinating those types of things and letting each other know what our challenges are. And it takes a lot of work to do that, but we're doing that this year, and it's a dry year. What a great year to be having such a situation. It's dismal for water supply, but in terms of strengthening a relationship between the locals and environmentalists and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, this gives us an opportunity to cement that.
That's terrific, Jim. Kristen, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, just real brief. I know we're wrapping up here, but this is actually an excellent opportunity for the Yolo Subbasin Groundwater Agency to get more engagement from the stakeholders, because there will be more concern about the surface water storage that we have available in future years. So as frustrating as it can be as an irrigation district, it's a really good opportunity for us to be soliciting feedback from the community. And then internally, we have to work on improving or re-examining our governance structure, because we're currently in the process of trying to figure out what is the most sustainable governance structure moving, or financing mechanism moving forward. Excuse me. So as weird as it is, it's going to probably be a really good thing for the Yolo Subbasin Groundwater Agency, and for stressing the importance of what we're doing. And with Maurice having them thank a GSA today.
Yeah, thank your GSA. New bumper sticker. Well, this has been a terrific conversation. Thanks to all 3 of you for the work you're doing and for being willing to share some ideas and concepts with us and helping to set an agenda. The NCWA Groundwater Management Task Force is obviously very focused over the next few months on making sure the agencies are putting together the best possible plans we can, so that we can make the Department of Water Resources job incredibly easy, and the State Water Board can stay in Sacramento, except when we want to come out and show them our projects. Thank you again for your time. Thanks for participating in the NCWA annual conference, and we'll see you out in the fields.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.